Hello, welcome to Navigating to Success. I'm Jeff Carlton, Certified Focal Point Business and Executive Coach, and I'm excited today to have from Billings, Montana, Mark Nitz, um, founder of ClearSight Leadership and Strategy. He's got a number of other activities that he's involved in, and he's got some big news for the end about a project he's working on. So welcome, Mark.
Good afternoon, Jeff. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. So tell everyone about ClearSight and what your purpose is.
Yes, ClearSight Leadership and Strategy exists because I experienced a number of corporate missteps over the last 25 years that I felt were worth correcting. And ClearSight Leadership is primarily about bringing the humanness back into business and doing so through education, training, practical application of formal strategy, formal leadership training, formal leadership skills development, and teaching people, teaching corporate execs in particular and their leadership teams the true nature of leadership as a profession. The old adage is that leadership is a soft skill. And I come at that with two responses. One is it's not a skill, it's many. And two, it's not soft at all. It's a series of solid professional capabilities that people need to learn.
I couldn't agree with you more. And My experience in the military was certainly we were trained up extremely well at our professions, um, but the leadership part of it was often overlooked. And a lot of people only possessed the directive, and so they led with whatever was on their collar, as opposed with what was in their head or what was. This is a big part of it, folks. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
how are you solo or do you have a team? What's the structure of ClearSight?
Right now, I am solo as far as the structure, as far as the hierarchy of the organization. I do have some people that are licensed to practice essentially and provide some of that executive development, leadership development, team training, things like that. Kind of similar to a franchise, but more on the individual licensure level.
Okay. And is this your content that you've developed over years solely?
Yes, yes, it is. So I spent 25-ish years as a geospatial information analyst, uh, kind of as my primary role. I also spent about a dozen years as a commissioned officer in the Army National Guard. Uh, Good four of those on active duty, so yeah, pretty equivalent to what a lot of people do. And had also an initial entry into a career into the professional world as a geologist, project managing geologist. So what I've done is taken all of those experiences and essentially condensed them to start with, figure out what the relevant, pertinent, and high power capabilities are that I believe people need in order to bring their vision to fruition and enable their initiatives. And though, so yeah, it's my content because I've taken that then and re-expanded it to fit the corporate structure, the corporate world, uh, team needs within the hierarchy of organizations that need high-performing teams, focus on productivity, and in particular are challenged by lots of staff turnover, team goals that or organizational goals that certain teams hit their goals, certain teams don't, and it's not obvious why, things like that. So, yep.
Very cool. how when did you found when did you start ClearSight?
Almost exactly 2 years ago. In fact, 2 years and a couple of weeks.
And what's your who I mean, do you work specifically in Montana, national, international? Who's your ideal client?
So I am not limited by geography. Modern day, we have all this great technology. I prefer to do face to face. I do national. I've got some clients in the Midwest. So I do national. I've got a few clients here locally that I really enjoy working with. My target audience is, mid-size, larger corporations, anywhere from probably a few hundred to about 1,000 staff, and typically I'd say the 1.5 to 2 million gross annual revenue range on up.
Right.
And it's and really the target is the ones that again they're challenged by, hey, we get a lot of staff turnover, causes institutional knowledge problems. What can we do about it? Challenged by objectives that either are met or not met, and it seems kind of sporadic who hits them, things like that.
So do they reach out to you or do you reach out to them?
It's kind of a chain reaction effect. I targeted the first few of my clients that have resulted in referrals that I then reinvigorate that targeting with those referrals that
Sure.
they refer me again, and that's pretty much how it works. Yeah.
Um, what are you pretty comfortable right now with the size and scale of ClearSight, or are you looking to grow it?
I would really like to grow. The content and capabilities that ClearSight provides are pretty solid. They're well tested. I've done quite a bit of practical application with them. What I'd really like to do, my daydream for the next 18 months, is to find the right people with the right strengths to start to strengthen that licensure capability to where I have a series of certified trainers who can go into organizations large and small, so that I can kind of unlimit the scope that I'm focused on and start to help those smaller teams. Maybe there's a learning and development section of a smaller organization that wants some team leadership guidance. I'd love to be able to provide that with, again, the right people who are, who I can certify and make sure that they've got all the skills and motivation they need.
So, the 18-month daydream, I like that. I like that a lot. So are you actively seeking those people now, or
Not quite yet, no. Passively seeking. I've got some people, kind of call it, on the list, and that I'd love to chat more in depth with about it and see if they are really truly on board, but not actively at the moment. That'll
so
come pretty soon.
yeah, and so it's interesting because a lot of the people that come on a podcast, a lot of people that I work with, um, they hit that. It's almost like growth is not the smooth curve that we always imagine. A lot of times it looks a lot more like a staircase, and so they hit that vertical part of the staircase, and it's like, I'm afraid to lift my leg and take that next step.
Yep.
Um, what's your biggest challenge, or what's holding you back from pulling the trigger and going now?
Yep. So I'd say there's actually not really anything holding me back. It just so happens you're asking the question in that moment. But sustainment, I teach, preach, and stand up on a sustainment soapbox pretty often. A sustainable business model that is actually revenue producing is, in my opinion, vital to assuring you can grow. Because if you don't have that platform, or you don't have that plateau when you try to grow. If you fail, you fall off the cliff and you pretty much crash into the into the gully at the
Yeah.
bottom. uh, if you're smart about it and you build that sustainable capability, you have something to rely on when that if that growth were to fail, you took the risk, but you can still keep going with what you were doing.
It's an interesting point you bring up. Because I've again had the experience talking to, because I get to talk to people all the time doing this podcast about how they gracefully downsized after COVID or after some other significant event, or in some cases did not gracefully downsize, but downsized with a
Mm-hmm.
machete out of necessity. And I did have
Mm-hmm.
somebody on a few months ago. Um, and this was interesting because you brought it up, is which comes first, the chicken or the egg? When you talk about sustainability, I asked him, I said, what would what is the key to starting a business? He said, get 7 clients and then start buying equipment. Don't go out and buy a Bobcat and then go looking for clients, because you got to make payments. Get the clients and then buy the equipment to suit the tasks. And that's kind of what I heard you say,
Yep.
if I got that right.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And yeah, and to kind of add on to that, or to support that, I think starting the business, there's a period of months or even a year or so where the game is a little bit different. But once you start to bring in those clients, and once you start to resource, you got to make sure that that is manageable and that you can keep it. Because if you just simply go, oh, now I'm going to grow to this, and you don't focus on what on having that landing area, you'll wind up stuck in the muck because you crash pretty hard. And yeah, like you said, you don't want to have to downsize with a machete. It's better to know you have a place to land.
Yeah, no, it's a solid, it's like the old Southwest Airlines when they really blew up. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. We're
Mhm.
gonna, we are not, we are going to restrain our growth to only 20% a year.
Mhm.
Um, it was
Yep.
a huge lesson learned for a lot of people out there in the business world,
Mhm.
that to avoid that implosion of outgrowing,
Mhm.
too big for your britches, I guess, is
Yep.
the old school way of saying it, right? Um,
Yep. Yep.
so one final question on content. What do you think the biggest leadership challenge, when we talk about, when people say it's a soft skill, and I agree with you, that's a BS cop out statement. Leadership is very much leadership is very much a learned skill, and I made, in my military career 35 years, I'm sure I made every mistake possible at some point with somebody. Um, but what do you think the biggest lacking points, we'll put some plurality to it, are out there that have to be tackled in the corporate world?
Yeah, I think there are many. I'm glad you brought up the soft skill piece again, because I think that's actually a term that's a bad perspective, to the point that it's damaging to people who are good leaders, whether they've had education in it or not. Because what it teaches is that your SMEs are going to be better leaders than your professional leaders, and that's just, to me, that's backwards. Your SMEs can be excellent leaders if they've been taught how to lead, but you can't, if you go around basically dissing leadership by saying things like it's a soft skill. You're removing some you're eliminating the possibility of that leadership skill set being viable for your organization. And the result of that, I think, is part of why organizations are pulling their hair out with things like staff retention. You can keep your staff if you have professional leaders. Skills in particular to kind of put to put names on the skills. The skills in particular are things like adaptability. How do you develop adaptability in your team? It's not just, hey, we run an agile organization. Agile is great for IT people. Teach it as adaptability to your team leaders, and have your team leaders learn how to A, delegate, and B, provide disciplined initiative to their team members, so that their team members have guardrails, but they retain their autonomy. You could overcome about 20% of the staff retention issues you have just by doing that. And I think that's something that is automatically taken off the table if you say, leadership is just a soft skill.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I just had a client discussion last week about where I asked him, I said, are your employees empowered to fail? What's your risk tolerance to allow an employee to fail in the spirit of letting them learn
Mm-hmm.
before you come in and swoop in and fix what they were doing wrong as the
Yeah.
subject matter expert?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big part, is having the courage to let your people screw it up,
Yep.
but
Absolutely.
balance that with risk tolerance. So,
Yeah.
well,
Yep.
let's wrap this up. Tell everybody else. You already kind of let the cat out of the bag with me about your exciting project.
Yep. Here in about 6 weeks, approximately, my book will be published, and that book title is Leadership: The Greatest Profession on Earth. And it digs into a lot of these concepts. It digs into it even goes to the level of providing some templated skill sets that team leaders, organizational leaders can work on, practice with their people, share out with their people. But in addition, it focuses largely on the notion that values are going to somehow, if you, values are going to somehow save your organization on their own. And there are a lot of companies out there that are implementing either renovated or rejuvenated values, or they've never had them before and they're creating them. And a year, 18 months down the road, they wonder why in the world this isn't working. Why hasn't our culture improved? And it's not because the values don't mean anything. It's because the values don't aim at something. And what those values need to aim at are the four virtues of justice, courage, patience, and wisdom. And if you give your staff, you give your leaders knowledge of those things, and then build the values from them, not only do you have ethics-focused values, you have values that make sense, because those are the things that drive humankind. And when they make sense to the people, all of a sudden they can make decisions around these values, and they don't see the values as competing. Plus, it enables that disciplined initiative piece that I'm so fond of.
Yeah, and I mean, simple things like just saying please and thank you goes a long ways. So, well,
Absolutely.
Mark, this has been absolute
Sure
pleasure.
does.
Let's um uh we'll make sure and put links to or at least let everybody know what the book is. So look it up here in about 6 weeks, which is about the time this will launch. So any other parting shots before we wrap this up, Mark?
I just really appreciate your time and your interest, Jeff. And thanks again for inviting me and for a lovely conversation. Look forward to more.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everybody that joined and on this business journey explored, we'll see you next time on Navigating Success. Success. Thanks again.